Welcome to Brass Tacks. I'm Zaka Jacob. Rahul Gandhi's Bharat Jodo Nyay Yatra continues along Uttar Pradesh, while in Amethi and Raebareli, Mr. Gandhi blasted a news reporter who asked him a question by asking him what his caste was and what his owner's name and caste were. Now, Mr. Gandhi was trying to drive home a familiar theme that mainstream representation of OBCs, Dalits and other backwards is minimal. And to start doing this, India needs a caste census. He also castigated the Ram Mandir inauguration ceremony, saying there were hardly any OBCs there for the ceremony. But this is an idea that has tried and failed, most recently in the winter elections that happened in Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh. The BJP won those states comfortably despite the Congress again and again making the caste census a big issue. How will OBC politics work when Mr. Gandhi, who is not an OBC, is pitted against Mr. Modi, who arguably is the biggest OBC mascot in this country? So what exactly is Mr. Gandhi trying to get at with an idea that's been tried, tested and failed?
जी है, आपके मालिक का क्या नाम है? आपके मालिक का क्या नाम है? क्या नाम है? नाम बताओ, नाम बताओ। राम मंदिर में आपको नरेंद्र मोदी दिखेगा, आपको अंबानी दिखेगा, आपको अदानी दिखेगा, आपको हिंदुस्तान के सबसे अरबपति दिखेंगे, आपको एक पिछड़ा नहीं दिखेगा, आपको एक दलित नहीं दिखेगा, आपको एक आदिवासी नहीं दिखेगा। क्यों नहीं? कभी कहेंगे उधर देखो भैया अमिताभ बच्चन नाच रहा है, वो देखो भैया उसके साथ ऐश्वर्या राय नाच रही है। यूपी का भविष्य रात को शराब पिए नाच रहा है, डांस कर रहा है नशे में।
ये उनकी महिला विरोधी और जिस प्रकार की उनकी मानसिकता है उसको दर्शाता है। ये मिसोजिनिस्टिक, पेट्रियार्कल और अति महिला विरोधी मानसिकता झलक रही है।
ये बहुत पीड़ादायक है। राहुल गांधी कब सीखेंगे? ये कौन सी भाषा है राहुल गांधी? क्या मतलब है इसका? क्या वो सिर्फ लोगों को इंसल्ट करने के लिए, अपमानित करने के लिए बैठे हुए हैं?
All right, let's go straight across to our guests who are joining us on this special edition of Brass Tacks. Shehzad is national spokesperson of the BJP. He's joining us here in the studios. M Kumaramangalam is spokesperson of the Congress Party. Rashid Kidwai, senior journalist who's been covering the Congress for a number of years now. And Shekhar Iyer, also senior journalist, joining us. Mohan, let me start with you first. What is the idea behind Mr. Gandhi going on these very angry rants, if I may, on the OBC question? The reporter that he took off against in Amethi also happened to be an OBC. What is Mr. Gandhi trying to get at? Because this idea of OBC politics, caste census, etc. was a tried and failed idea as recently as the December elections in Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh. So why is he trying to once again beat a drum which is hollow?
Zaka, why do you say it failed? I mean, I guess the first place where the OBC idea came about or actually caught the people's imagination was the Mandal movement. And there isn't one failed election or two failed elections in the north. But by the way, state elections, electorate makes choices based on a variety of factors. That wasn't the central message anyway of those elections. Why would you say it failed? Secondly, if you go back to what Mr. Gandhi is saying, and I take offense to the term you used, which is ranting, he's trying to make a larger point wherein the disempowered, the backward classes in our society do not have their rightful share of the wealth in our society, of the importance of society. So to compare and contrast that, he's using symbols like Bollywood actors who Mr. Modi loves taking selfies with and hanging out with. You'll see Mr. Gandhi more taking selfies with or hanging out with auto drivers or mechanics. That contrast is visible for all to see. And he's making a larger point here, which is that backward classes are not getting their rightful share of this country's wealth or power. And what we're doing is we're not paying attention to those issues, and we're just focusing on infotainment, if you will, or newstainment, if you will.
Well, once again, Mohan, look, at least on this show, I try to not do newstainment as you
I didn't say it was your show, Zaka.
Fair enough. I'm ignoring that. I'm asking you a very serious question. The reason I say it failed is because caste census was the singular point that Mr. Gandhi harped on during the winter elections in Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh. I can play out umpteen number of his campaign speeches. It didn't work. The BJP beat the Congress fair and square in all three North Indian heartland states. Number one. No, that's not my question. Give me 30 seconds. I'm getting to a question. And the question is very simple. If Mr. Gandhi is playing quote-unquote identity politics, and you're right, I mean, there isn't adequate representation of OBCs or backward castes in mainstream India. Forget about, our politics, but, media, whatever, scientific community, businesses, that may be a valid point. But how will it cut eyes with voters when Mr. Gandhi, who is not an OBC, is pitted against Mr. Modi, who is arguably the biggest OBC mascot in this country right now? How is this going to work?
You think Mr. Modi being an OBC is all that matters? I mean, I think, I don't know how that even makes sense, because if one person who's an OBC is a prime minister, and I would just say, okay, how about the other number of OBCs who are secretaries, who are in power in executive positions? These are the questions we should be asking. One OBC becoming prime minister does not solve the problem. And Mr. Gandhi, whether he's OBC or not OBC, has absolutely no bearing on what he should talk about. I mean, this is like saying that Mahatma Gandhi back in the day could not fight for the cause of Dalits because he wasn't a Dalit himself. That's exactly the wrong kind of thinking in India. I think there needs to be an awakening on this issue. And what Mr. Gandhi is doing, the most powerful voice in the opposition, is lending his voice to this issue.
Okay,
which is why
Shehzad to answer the point that M Kumaramangalam is making, that one Modi as an OBC does not necessarily make the BJP an OBC party.
I heard Mohan very patiently, so I hope he will not interrupt, and just give me 35 seconds to address this, then I'll make my other points. By the way, because he spoke about Mandal and caste census, till 1931 we used to have caste census. Nehruji stopped caste census and is on record to say that this is going to divide the country. Mandal report came 1980 and 1984. Rajiv ji and Indira ji opposed it, did not allow it to be implemented. In fact, when VP Singh government backed by BJP was implementing this, Rajiv Gandhi got up in Parliament September 1990 and said that we oppose this, and their slogan at that time was na jaat par na paat par muhar lagegi haath par. It is not just question of Prime Minister being Modi being a OBC. In fact, 27% of our ministers are OBC, 40% of our MLCs are OBC, 85 MPs, that means more than entire MP of Congress are OBCs of the Bharatiya Janata Party, and this is why we walk the talk. We are not taking selfies with poor people. We have come from poor background. Therefore, we don't need to have poverty as a state of mind and start taking selfies with mechanics or with plumbers, because we live that life. Vishwakarma Yojana to making constitutional status for OBC's commission. All of this has been done by us, which they have not done. But I have 3 or 4 pointed questions to ask. One, sir, why didn't you award Bharat Ratna to Karpuri Thakur when you had 10 years in UPA 2004 to 14? No answer. 2, are you acknowledging that at that time Ram Manohar Lohia and others who used to say that Mandal is the way, and Indira ji used to oppose it? Indira ji was wrong, Nehru ji was wrong, Rajiv ji was wrong. 2, 3, Sitaram Kesi, one OBC president you had, what you did to him is best known to me. I am also a congressman at one point of time. I know how his dhoti and kurta were torn apart. 4, please tell me, Mr. Mohan, today when you talk about all of this caste angle, when you had opportunity, they won Telangana, they make who Chief Minister? Revanth Reddy, who says OBC DNA, Kurmi DNA is less than Telangana DNA, and we get a chance. We made Mohan Yadav the Chief Minister in Madhya Pradesh, and today therefore I ask Mr. Mohan that please tell me that Secretaries Government of India, today the people who are empaneled as secretaries come from the 1991-92 batch. The OBC reservation only started in 94-95. This means you yourself are responsible for not having this done earlier. Had you done it earlier, today we would have a maximum number of secretaries from the OBC community. It is not because of your government's failure. And today tell us whether Nehru and Indira and Rajiv ji were wrong. And finally, on the larger point, on this... You have abused OBC Samaj and you got convicted by a court of law. And the statement made to the journalist that tumhara malik kaun hai, and that journalist whose name incidentally is Yadav got beaten up by the Congress goons. It's not the first time. You remember an NDTV journalist asked Rahul Gandhi a question. He said, your malik has changed. This shows intolerance. Emergency DNA is a part of their upbringing.
Okay.
And therefore this is intolerance towards questions.
To Shehzad, and then I'll go to Rashid Kidwai and Shekhar Iyer after that. Yeah.
Which questions do you want me to respond to?
No, he's asked you 3-4 questions.
Just respond to all his questions in one. Yeah, there are 3 or 4 questions there. I'll respond to all of it in one. That whether Mr. Rajiv Gandhi had opposed it or not, whether Srimati Indira Gandhi had opposed it at the time or not, the question is, in today's time, what is the BJP's position on it? When we are saying we did a socioeconomic caste survey, then we demitted government, they came into government, they didn't even do a survey, they didn't do a caste census, forget everything else. And when we're saying that now we will do it, or why don't you do it, what is stopping them? We're saying now, right? Let's not go back 40 years or 50 years. We want to know why you won't do it now. If we say that OBCs are not getting their rightful share, sure, Shehzad, I agree with you. Maybe we should have done it way back then. But today we're saying we're going to do it. Why won't you come on board and say you would do it now?
Okay, 10 seconds. I need to go to the other 2 guests.
Zaka, please ask
Why aren't you doing a caste census?
Zaka, please ask your research team to do simultaneous research. Amit Shah has been asked this question and he said on record, we are not opposed to caste census, but caste survey was opposed by DK Shiv Kumar. Caste survey was opposed by the Chhattisgarh CM who was there, Bhupesh Baghel. He did not release the figures. Even in Karnataka, they have not released the figures. And by the way, TMC is on record to say we are against caste census.
Okay.
And TMC is part of India Alliance.
So let me ask Rashid.
Let them all oppose it. You are in power.
Okay, 1 second. Let me go to Rashid.
In Karnataka, you are in power.
Please.
Karnataka, you are in power.
Let me ask the journalist to please come in. Rashid Kidwai. No, I want to get to the specific point of why Mr. Gandhi is going on and on about OBC politics. I have some data here, and I'm going by CSDS Lokniti post-poll survey, Rashid, of the 2019 Lok Sabha elections. And they've broken it down by caste as to which caste, how much percentage voted for which party. So in Uttar Pradesh, Yadavs in the 2019 election, 23% voted for the BJP, 5% voted for the Congress, 60% voted for the SP, BSP, Mahagathbandhan. In 2019, they were fighting together, SPN and BSP. Kurmis and Koiris, 80% voted for the BJP, 5% voted for the Congress, 14% for the Mahagathbandhan. Other OBCs, non-Yadav OBCs and so on, 72% voted for the BJP, 5% for the Congress and 18% for the Mahagathbandhan. So please tell me from an electoral point of view, where the Congress is getting no more than 5% of these said castes, why is Mr. Gandhi harping about them again and again?
Zaka, every political party and individual has a right to live and learn. If Mr. Gandhi is adamant about caste census or caste-based reservations and all, he is within his rights. Only problem as I see it that his own political party it seems to be it's not on board. You see, we don't get to see 150 or more Congress leaders across the country talking about it. This we saw it in 5 state assembly elections. We are seeing it now. So there is a bit of a disconnect with what Mr. Rahul Gandhi is saying and what the Congress is saying. See, Zaka, you're raising a very pertinent issue that electorally it may not be beneficial. For your benefit, see, BJP was talking about and Bharatiya Janata Party was talking about cultural nationalism. It did not fetch them votes in the first 9 or 10 elections. That doesn't mean that they give up. In fact, that is the story of BJP and Sangh Parivar's resilience. So therefore, I think politically speaking, the Congress has a right to do it. It was VP Singh who implemented Mandal Commission, who was not OBC. So these things happen. Only thing is whether
Rashid, the point, and you know this better than all of us here on this panel, that the Congress party's politics for the last number of decades has never been an OBC politics. The major caste groups that have, particularly in northern India, that have voted for the Congress have either been upper caste, Brahmins usually, plus a combination of Dalits, right? This and of course minorities. The Congress was never a Mandal party. So Mr. Gandhi is trying to pivot a party which has never been a Mandal party into a Mandal party. I'm trying to understand the electoral/political logic of that.
Yes, Zaka, you're absolutely right. The Congress Historically, all Congress position papers have been opposed to caste. They consider caste as something adversarial. But there is a change of position. But my problem is that Congress has not discussed it at the level of AICC, PCC, and in the AICC sessions, etc., or in any of its political resolutions, etc. So this is a problem. The Shehzad was referring to Zaat pe na paat pe, Mohan lagi ke haath pe. This was a slogan coined by Indira Gandhi in 1980 elections. So that means at that point of time also Congress was against anything to do with caste. But this is an afterthought. Zaka, again I would say it is not problematic. Problematic part is that the party has to be on board. What we see today, that whether it was Bhupesh Baghel or Ashok Gehlot or Kamal Nath, they did not talk about caste-based census and caste-based reservations. Even now, nobody is talking about it.
And by the way, all three of them are OBC leaders. All three of them happen to be OBC chief ministers of the Congress, who were not exactly on board, as Rashid said. Even during the campaign for those three states, they were not fully on board with this whole idea of a caste census. But be that as it may, Shekhar Iyer, so I gave you the data about the OBC caste and how they voted in UP. And now I have data for the Dalits, right? The Jatavs, who've traditionally backed Mayawati's party. In the 2019 Lok Sabha election, as per CSDS Lokniti's post poll, 17% voted for the BJP, 1% for the Congress. And frankly, for a party which used to get a bulk of the Dalit vote prior to the emergence of the BSP, only 1% of Dalits voting for the Congress is a huge problem. And 75% voted for the Mahagathbandhan. Other scheduled castes, non-Jatav Dalits, 48% voted for the BJP, 7% for the Congress, and 42% for the Mahagathbandhan. The problem for the Congress is this, and the problem with this whole Mandal politics pitch or pivot that Mr. Gandhi is trying to reach at, is that today's politics of the BJP has subsumed caste within the larger umbrella of Hindutva. That is the problem. And somehow the Congress, not just the Congress, even the Mandal parties, SP, Nitish Kumar's party, RJD, they don't seem to have an answer to how to respond to that. How can you take on the BJP subsuming caste under the wider umbrella of Hindutva? That is the bigger problem for these parties.
Indeed, Zaka, you are right. That's a very big problem. But there is even more a bigger problem. Why Rahul doesn't get the support of other Congress leaders the way he is pushing this agenda? You see, Congress in the post-Mandal period, always preferred what is called a social harmony route. You speak for empowerment of OBCs without, creating a situation where OBCs versus the rest or things like that. This was the policy of the Congress, and that is also the policy of the BJP. That is how they managed to subsume everybody. Now, today, the way Rahul Gandhi is speaking, as if, the jarring note, and particularly that episode with that reporter after he got roughed up by others, I mean, you are constantly playing it up in such a way that the OBCs should get angry and attack each other. Whereas the OBC-based parties themselves, whether it is Samajwadi Party, even Mayawati, I have realized you cannot win elections with just one section. You need to bring in a harmonious, some kind of an alignment with other castes too. You cannot win elections just on the basis of one party. Mayawati realized it early. That's why she called for Sarva Samaj. But somewhere down the way, she lost it and went back to her old formula. And that pulled her down. So for parties to succeed on the basis of caste equation, caste empowerment, it's very important that the message is put in a harmonious tone, which Rahul Gandhi is not doing it. And he thinks, and the fact is Congress has been a centrist party. In the last 10 years and even before, the attempt by Rahul Gandhi, even I would say to a great extent by Sonia Gandhi, to take it to the left of center, and now to a position where you want to play with casteist elements, and that too in an extremist tone. That is not going to benefit the Congress, because at the end of the day, all parties realize you need all communities.
Okay.
Maybe some communities more than the others. But I wish Rahul Gandhi also looks at this angle.
No, I think that's an absolutely valid point. I mean, people tend to forget this, that Mayawati, the only time she came to power in UP, it was Dalits plus Brahmins. There was a mega outreach to Brahmins. Mr. Mishra at that time used to be the all-powerful sort of political secretary at that time. And there were a substantial number of Brahmin candidates who won on a BSP ticket in 2007 when she won and became chief minister. But be that as it may, I don't want to get into the nitty-gritties of that. The larger point, Mohan Kumaramangalam, seems to be that Mr. Gandhi is speaking to voters in the Bharat Jodo Nyaya Yatra in a very angry tone. what is the India Alliance, what is the Congress Party's alternative to the BJP? What alternative model are you proposing to the people? Because angry young man is good to see on silver screen, not necessarily to vote for.
Zaka, first of all, there isn't an A versus B contest that we're proposing from the very beginning. Having said that, Mr. Gandhi is obviously the leader of the Congress Party, the foremost leader of the Congress Party, and as the India Alliance has, as I've been saying for a while, and now it's pretty obvious, they're not going to pick one candidate against Mr. Modi. Now, in terms of what does the BJP have to offer in terms of model of development versus what we are going to offer, I grant you this, that we are yet to articulate on the campaign stage beyond the three nyayas that Mr. Gandhi has talked about on the Yatra, which is social injustice, or social justice rather, political justice and economic justice. There are some contours of that, but it hasn't been fleshed out to the extent that it should be. You will see that in the coming days because the manifesto process is now.
You don't think he has an anger issue? I mean, I'm no judge. I'm no behavioral scientist.
I don't think he has an anger issue. I think he's being forceful in trying to convey the level of injustice that he feels has been done.
Okay.
Can I
request my producer to cue up those three sound bites? We'll play it again. I think he'll take about 30 seconds. So Shehzad, please respond. Because it seems to me that the first Bharat Jodo Yatra was all about unity, coming together. All Indians need to, rise up against hatred and so on and so forth. It seemed to have a unifying message. I'm not sure that's quite the message in the second Yatra, because there seems to be a very angry tone, or at least certainly underlying tone to Mr. Gandhi's pronouncements. But as we queue up that set of sound bites, Shehzad.
Just give me 30-45 seconds and then you can play those clips. Look, the problem is that Rahul Gandhi is suffering from some kind of frustration, that he knows that people are leaving him, people are not expressing confidence in him, he's losing election after election, and also his own position is probably making him say these things. It's not a first time, it's not a slip of tongue. By the way, the comments on Aishwarya Rai, she's not even in politics, to say Amitabh Bachchan naach raha tha. Now, Zaka, for those who speak Hindi as their first language, tha is never used for a senior person such as 80 years old. And then you say, uske saath ye naach rahi thi. Like a father-in-law and a daughter-in-law who have not been in politics. And in fact, all they have had relations with your family. Indira Gandhi and Rajiv ji had great relations with Amitabh ji. So why would you draw them into this and make this kind of misogynistic? And he's been saying it all over, that Aishwarya was at the Ram Lalla Pran Pratishtha. She was not there. He kept saying Adani was there. Adani was not there. So it is factually wrong, it's misogynistic, and this is not the first time. Sena, khoon ki dalali, Sena ko China peet rahi hai. Then he goes and says OBC ... because of which he got convicted. Chaukidar chor is attributed to Supreme Court, he has to apologize. So this is one angle that he is frustrated. Secondly, he is low on content. And just 10 seconds on that. I'll tell you why he's low on content. We are very clear, we are on Ram Lalla and Gita. What does that mean? Rashtriya Suraksha, Atmanirbhar Bharat, Mahila, leadership, Labharti, Arthyavastha. And Gita means growth, infrastructure, technology, and Arthyavastha being taken from 10 to 5th. We have a clear vision and mission for this country. This is only get all the confusion together, division together, corruption together, and offer something which people are rejecting.
I've been told by my producer that we have the sound bites queued up. So I'm going to play that out. I'm going to leave the judgment part to the viewers. I'll of course get Rashid and Shekhar to weigh in. I'm not going to comment on the tonality of this, but let's just play it out. Yeah.
आपके मालिक का क्या नाम है? आपके मालिक का क्या नाम है? क्या नाम है? नाम बताओ, नाम बताओ। ओए मारो मत यार, मारो मत उसको, मारना नहीं है, मारना नहीं है। नाम बताओ उसका। वो ओबीसी है? नहीं। वो दलित है? नहीं। वो आदिवासी है? नहीं। अरबपति है वो। आपने राम मंदिर का फंक्शन देखा? देखा? उसमें आपने एक ओबीसी चेहरा देखा, एक दलित चेहरा देखा, एक आदिवासी चेहरा देखा? नहीं, उसमें एक नहीं था। उसमें अमिताभ बच्चन थे, ऐश्वर्या राय थी, नरेंद्र मोदी थे। 73% का एक व्यक्ति नहीं था उसमें। कभी कहेंगे उधर देखो भैया अमिताभ बच्चन नाच रहा है, वो देखो भैया उसके साथ ऐश्वर्या राय नाच रही है। आप लोग इधर उधर देखोगे, मजदूरों की बात नहीं होगी, किसानों की बात नहीं होगी। वाराणसी में देखा मैंने, रात को बाजा बज रहा है, ठहर जा, बाजा बज रहा है, वहां पे शराब पिए सड़क पे लेटते हुए बाजा बज रहा है। यूपी का भविष्य रात को शराब पिए नाच रहा है, डांस कर रहा है नशे में।
Rashid, but what do you make of it? I mean, this has happened in the space of the last 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, I think, Zaka, this is quite, some of these utterances are quite uncalled for. As Aristotle had said, aggression or anger is good or can be justified if it's at the right place, right time, right quantity, right cause, etc. And here we see a paucity of it. But I just want to add that this is not a first or the last, this kind of remarks or statement or behavior by a politician. We have seen it dime a dozen. I mean, you look at, that how that the BJP MP from Gonda, that person who was involved in was facing this sexual harassment charges, the way he used to speak, the way
Brijbhushan.
50 crore girlfriend, all those kind of remarks were made. So it's political decency should be there. It's not a one-way street. Mr. Rahul Gandhi would be better off apologizing to the journalist and to the kind of remarks he has made. But
No,
all
I just wanted to
cannot
ask,
be nitpicking.
especially last year when he was undertaking the Bharat Jodo Yatra, and it seemed to have a message of unity and coming together and going past hate and so on and so forth. In fact, he went to the extent of saying Mohabbat ka dukaan and all of that. This year, though, I don't see that. I don't see or hear that much, because either the tone and tonality of this yatra is very different from last year, or as Shehzad said, maybe it's because of the continuing electoral defeats. I don't know. I'm not passing judgment. I'm just asking you for your views, Rashid.
Yeah, I think, for one, first of all, as I said, Rahul Gandhi should not have done it. I think he's being ill-advised by his, the advisors who have a left-of-center orientation or leanings. They are anti-media. All these things it's just reflecting very poorly on Rahul Gandhi. Rahul Gandhi must know what he is. He is Indira Gandhi's grandson. He's Jawaharlal Nehru's, great-grandson. There is a kind of decency that people expect from him. And of these remarks, as I said, are extremely condemnable, but it is not. All political parties are guilty of it, including Shehzad's Poonawala's party too.
Shekhar, while this has been happening, and obviously the media will go, the cameras will go to the sound bites which are on the extreme side. But even as this has been happening, one must acknowledge and underline the fact that today the Samajwadi Party and the Congress have more or less sewn up an alliance. So I think 16 or 17 seats they've agreed to give to the Congress, and from whatever we've heard from the Congress, they've also agreed to that. Tomorrow, we believe there is an AAP and Congress meeting where, again, a 5-2 formula for Delhi and I think an 8-5 formula for Punjab will more or less get sewn up. So there is something to be said of some of these North Indian states where, up until just last week, it seemed like there wouldn't be any India alliance, at least a functional one on the ground. Some things seem to be stitched up. So that much also needs to be said, if not given credit for.
Yeah, but this could have happened 3 days ago, 4 days ago. It is after Priyanka Gandhi's intervention. She spoke to Akhilesh and Congress hasn't gained in the last 3 days. They had to give up those 3 seats which they were insisting. Because they gave up Bijnor, Balia and Moradabad, then there was no problem. And I think Rahul should learn from Akhilesh. See, for all the problem challenges that Akhilesh faces, I have not seen a single occasion where Akhilesh Yadav loses his cool or talks in the manner way the Rahul talks. And I have never seen Akhilesh ever playing a OBC card to a point where it will be except for all other sections. He has never done it. So I think the alliances will happen, because without alliances at this juncture, it will not serve any political party's purpose not to go for some kind of an understanding. But then Rahul could do better, and I still say Rahul can make his own point in little bit pleasanter way, and the message could get home.
Okay, Shehzad.
Rashid just invoked Rahul's great pedigree. What he forgets is that Rajiv Gandhi once upon a time got up and justified the Sikh riots by saying बड़ा पेड़ गिरता है तो धरती हिलती है. This is the pedigree he comes from. मोहब्बत के दुकान में नफरत का ही सामान है, DNA से नफरत का सामान है. So they've made these kinds of statements time and again. We know what they used to talk about other leaders, including Ambedkar, and defeated Ambedkar also. In fact, Sam Pitroda, uncle to Rahul Gandhi, has said, who is Ambedkar? It was Nehruji's contribution. So this is their mindset. This is their DNA. Apart from that, sir, forget everything else. You can abuse BJP. You can say whatever. Mohan, I did not interrupt.
I'll give you
Mohan,
the
this is
last.
Zaka's show. Nobody needs to interrupt.
Mohan, I'll give you.
Nobody needs to interrupt. This is Zaka's show.
I'll come to you right after this. Let him finish.
The sign of a weak person is an interruption. So you speak in your turn, I'll speak in my turn. Chalo, you have 10,000 differences on us. No problem. Thank you. Listen to this.
जो हमारे जवानों को अरुणाचल प्रदेश में पीट रहे हैं, जो हमारे जवानों को अरुणाचल प्रदेश
हमारे जवानों को पीट रहे हैं, खून की दलाली. And by the way, forget this tone and tonality. Facts. Arey bhai sahab, in the Ram Mandir, first of all, you should know that Bridula Bai, who was a rag picker who gave 20 rupees for the mandir, was invited. The Shramiks were sitting there. The sons were sitting there. Many of them are OBC sons. Apart from that, the first mandir ka brick was laid by Kameshwar Chaupal. And the Ram Janmabhoomi Trust has a permanent representative of Dalit. So you don't even have your facts in place. You are seeing Aishwarya Rai in the Mandir Pran Pratishtha, but you are not able to see the Ram Leher. This is the problem. It is your DNA.
Mohan, final word. And
Political DNA.
I have to wrap up.
No, hold on. Please stop it here. And first of all, who's weak or who's not weak? Yeah, let's not get into that. The only person who makes personal attacks is someone who doesn't really have a point to make. So let us say that if not for the Congress party, Mr. Ambedkar wouldn't even been in the Constituent Assembly after he lost his election.
Oh, really?
So please, let's not talk about, so let's not talk about history here. Second, in terms of who has a crisis of confidence, if you guys were so confident, you would have let Mr. Gandhi go through Assam sort of unharmed instead of having people heckle him, trying to ban him from getting into Guwahati. And even every second day, your CM, Mr. Himanta Biswa Sarma, who believes in the Manu Shastra, goes about abusing Mr. Gandhi with no sum of substance. As far as talking about Aishwarya Rai or Mr. Bachchan is concerned, I think in the very beginning I made that point, which is they're both symbols of celebrities who Mr. Modi likes to hang out with, and he only likes to hang out with powerful people, not with the common person at all.
All right.
So if I'm surprised by the ability to deduce when Mr. Modi himself talks in riddles all the time, whether he says Shehzada or whether he says 50 crore ki girlfriend, their deduction works very well for Mr. Shehzad and other people. Unfortunately, when someone else uses symbols, you twist it around to make it sound almost perverse.
All right, 5 seconds. I have to wrap up.
The irony of the symbols chosen are that it is from the family of Jaya Bachchan, who's an MP from Samajwadi.
Okay. All right. We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much to all our guests. Let's see if Mr. Gandhi's message finds takers, finds resonance. But like I said, I go back to the December elections. The caste census didn't quite cut eyes. And if it hasn't in Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, I suspect, I'm not sure how it is going to in UP or Bihar for a general election, forget about a state election. Up next, a deep dive. It's a major development in the Israel-Hamas conflict. The United States, for the third time, has vetoed a resolution which would have called for a ceasefire. It has then invited the ire of nations like China, Russia, even Saudi Arabia. While the United States has called for a focus on the release of hostages. Remember, there are more than 100 hostages abducted by Hamas who are still in their captivity. Israel has rejected any call for a ceasefire. In fact, the last peace proposal that was mediated by Qatar and Egypt, which came forth last week, Benjamin Netanyahu called it a ludicrous proposal. Israel is maintaining its focus and its vow that this war will end only when Hamas is entirely eliminated. That brings us to the simple but fundamental question. Why is the United States, and even in last night's vote at the Security Council, it was the sole country that vetoed it, that voted against the resolution. 13 other countries voted for it. And what kind of moral and legal and political authority will the US have when it continues to back Israel, almost giving it a free pass, if you will, and yet at the same time expects the world to condemn Russia for its aggression against Ukraine? First, we'll do the deep dive, and then we'll go across to CNN's chief international correspondent, Nick Robertson. The United States on Tuesday cast the sole vote against a United Nations Security Council resolution that called for an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The American justification was that it feared it could disrupt the ongoing hostage negotiations which were being mediated by Qatar and Egypt. This was the third time that Washington wielded its veto power to block a resolution demanding a stop to the fighting in Gaza. But America finds itself increasingly isolated, both at the UN and outside, in the forceful support that it's given to Israel since the start of this war. Over the last 4 months, Israel has come under increasing international pressure, particularly on the mounting civilian casualties. But America continues to stand by it. Notwithstanding Tuesday's vote, there are clear signs that Joe Biden's patience is wearing thin. Last week, he called Israel's action in Gaza over the top. But more importantly, his government is negotiating a separate Security Council resolution that proposes a temporary ceasefire as soon as practical. This draft resolution was viewed by the New York Times. It also warns against the imminent invasion of the southern city of Rafah, which Israel has been threatening to do for the last few days now. More than 1 million Palestinians have fled to and are seeking refuge in Rafah right now. Until now, the United States has been the single P5 country or permanent member of the UN Security Council which has publicly and consistently rejected demands for an outright ceasefire. It has voted 3 times now since the start of this war against resolutions that have called for a ceasefire. It's the only country in the world that has openly sided with Israel despite mounting criticism. The latest resolution that was brought forth on Tuesday was brought forth by Algeria and it was vetoed by the US. Algeria's ambassador to the UN, Andre Bentiama, lashed out at America, telling the Council that the veto implies an endorsement of the brutal violence and the collective punishment that's been inflicted upon the Palestinians. He said silence is not a viable option. Now is not the time for being quiet. Now is the time for action. Now is the time for the truth. 13 Security Council members voted in favor of the resolution. America was the only country which voted against, while Britain abstained. The latest draft resolution put forth by the US does use the word ceasefire, something that America was loath to using in previous resolutions. But it also reflects President Biden's shifting attitude towards the criticism of Israel's execution of this war, and in particular, the planned offensive in Rafah. Biden has previously characterized Israel's response as over the top. He's even referred to Netanyahu in expletives in private conversations that he's had with his aides. But here is the bigger problem for the United States. Its moral and political and perhaps even legal authority is being challenged by its almost unconditional backing of Israel. As and when the US brings its own resolution, expect at least 2 countries to veto it: Russia and China, both of whom are Security Council permanent members and both of whom have been at the receiving end of American grandstanding. They will use this opportunity to pay America back in the same coin. The vetoes by the United States, and there have been 3 of them so far, this will also allow Russia and China, who are often criticized for their own human rights abuses, to accuse Washington of being a major roadblock in finding a lasting peace in Gaza. Israel, on the other hand, asserts that Rafah is one of the last remaining strongholds of Hamas. The Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has called Rafah Hamas's last center of gravity. The draft resolution also says that an invasion into Rafah would have serious implications for regional peace and security. It also explicitly asks Israel not to invade Rafah under the current circumstances. The question is Netanyahu listening? More than half of Gaza's civilian population has been forced to move into Rafah because of the war. In fact, at the start of this war, Israel had asked Gazans who were in the north and the center of the strip to evacuate to the south. Most people are crowded into temporary shelters and tent camps. America's concern, just like the rest of the world's, is that a major ground offensive into Rafah would not just harm civilians, but it could also displace these civilians into neighboring countries. Egypt, which borders Rafah, has refused to take in any Palestinians who are fleeing into its territory. There are also unconfirmed reports of Egypt building a wall on its border with Rafah. So the United States is slowly but surely shifting its position. It's moving in a direction which supports a temporary ceasefire, but it has to have certain conditions. The US is tying any potential peace deal to successful negotiations to release all the remaining hostages, as well as lifting all the barriers in further distribution of humanitarian aid. The US has been trying to mediate such a ceasefire deal along with Egypt and Qatar, but so far one hasn't come through. In fact, just last week, Netanyahu rejected a peace proposal from Hamas, calling it ludicrous. On Sunday, much before the UN vote, the United States had forewarned about its veto. The US ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, had said that she would veto the resolution presented by Algeria that called for an immediate halt in the fighting. Her argument was that such a move would jeopardize continuing negotiations on a deal that would return Israeli hostages in exchange for an extended pause in the fighting. So the United States is the only member of the Security Council to have voted 3 times against resolutions that have called for a ceasefire. Now, legally speaking, such resolutions are not binding on UN member countries, although some countries tend to ignore them more than others, China being a case in point. The Security Council has no mechanism to enforce its resolutions, but it can penalize those who violate it with sanctions. The United States abstained on a resolution that was passed in December, which called for an extended humanitarian pause, but it did not use the word permanent ceasefire or permanent cessation of hostilities. Israel has said that its forces are continuing to prepare for a ground invasion into Rafah. That is despite escalating international pressure. Not just the US, even many other members of the United Nations, other international institutions, they've all been calling for restraint on the part of Israel. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that civilians will be permitted to leave the densely packed, war-torn city that is Rafah, but it's not clear where these civilians would go to. While Palestinians in Rafah have already fled the fighting multiple times, they say their homes have been destroyed and they have nowhere to go to. The future of any peace in Gaza hangs on 2 factors: how much more patience and leverage Biden has over Netanyahu, and 2, how far Netanyahu can disregard pressure from his biggest ally and friend. All right, so let's try and make sense of this. This is the 3rd time the United States is vetoing a resolution at the UN Security Council in support of Israel, and which thereby rejecting a ceasefire or cessation of hostilities. Let me go across to CNN's chief international correspondent, Nick Robertson. He's joining us live from Tel Aviv. What explains the US and it consistently vetoing resolutions that have been brought forth to the UN Security Council, which have called for a cessation of hostilities? It's the 3rd time it's doing so. Seemingly, I mean, it's the only country that vetoed this resolution yesterday. 13 countries voted in favor and Britain abstained. What explains this?
Yeah, the US ambassador to the UN, Linda Greenfield, explained it this way. She said that the current resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire was, on the one hand, potentially going to upset and derail very delicate negotiations that are going on with Hamas that will lead to the release of hostages, or are intended to lead to the release of the hostages. She also said that in its current form, just putting forward an immediate ceasefire wouldn't put Israel and the Palestinians on a path to a sustainable peace. By this, she means that immediately having a ceasefire without addressing the hostage issue would leave a massive piece of unfinished business. So it's the US contention that what they're putting forward, which is a pause, a temporary pause in the hostilities at a time that is right, that appears to mean in the fairly near future, but they didn't put a timeline on it, but also includes the release of hostages, fits that US narrative that the best way to address this problem, to get the hostages released, which is what Ambassador Greenfield said everyone at the UN Security Council agrees on and is part of the US resolution, but not the one that was proposed by Algeria, gets to the bigger issue. So I think those are the two central reasons that the United States went the path they went along.
I'll come to the proposed US resolution in just 1 second, but I do want you to shed light to our viewers on where are the negotiations that were being mediated by Egypt and Qatar for a ceasefire deal that would potentially involve release of the remaining hostages. Where are those negotiations stuck at?
They're ongoing. They are going slowly. One of the US mediators, or certainly senior White House official, is going to be in the region, expected to be in Cairo, possibly Wednesday, possibly in Israel Thursday. That would be in the context of these negotiations. Egypt, one of the key interlocutors. You had the head of the CIA, Bill Burns, in the region last week. He was meeting with the Mossad chief, with the head of intelligence in Egypt, with the Qatari prime minister, to try to wrangle a way forward. But to your point, where is the impasse at the moment? It principally seems to be around Israel's insistence that hostages should be released, and that they are only offering a temporary pause in hostilities to achieve that. And Hamas is sticking to a position that says there should be a complete ceasefire, that the Israeli forces should pull back initially out of the urban areas inside of Gaza, and then after another 6 weeks or so, pull out of Gaza completely, that all military offensive activities should be halted permanently. That is Hamas's position. Now, the position on the table, as best we understand, is calling for that 6-week pause, but then built into that would be the possibility of getting to a permanent ceasefire. But at the moment, the Israelis are taking a very, very tough position, putting a lot of pressure on Hamas, insisting that Hamas comes to their terms, threatening in a couple of weeks, if Hamas doesn't hand over the hostages, to continue with a military offensive into Rafah, the southernmost part of Gaza, where close to 1.5 million Gazans are living right now, more than 1 million of them displaced from other areas inside of Gaza. The United States has said that to do that without providing a safe place to the civilians is not something that the United States can support. But that's where Israel is at the moment. It's trying to put maximum pressure on Hamas.
I do want to talk to you about the US-sponsored, US-drafted resolution, which you referred to in your earlier answer, which also calls for a ceasefire. But I believe, from whatever reporters have seen about the draft of that resolution, it says a ceasefire at a practicable time possible. When does the US plan to bring that to the UN Security Council?
Again, I think we get the best understanding, as best we can at the moment, from what the US ambassador to the UN said, Linda Greenfield said. She said that the language that would go in the US resolution is something that's to be discussed over the coming days. As best we can understand, this is something that doesn't have a fixed timeline to it, but seems to indicate that it's a process that can happen over the next couple of weeks. Of course, from an Israeli government perspective, that means there is less pressure on them to stop their military activities inside of Gaza, and that is the position that the United States has taken since October the 7th. However, the US pressure and language is publicly at least is growing greater on the Israeli government, but it still stops way short of joining the majority of international opinion, which is that there should be an immediate ceasefire. Again, the US position is to do that right now could upset the hostage negotiations and won't get to that path for a durable peace, which the United States says, and Ambassador Greenfield said, most of the countries within the, that round the table at the UN Security Council in the chamber there all agree that this path to durable peace is what everyone wants, and that is a path that has two independent states, an independent Palestine and an independent Israel. And this is, if you will, and we can term it this way in diplomatic terms, the carrot that the United States is holding out that can be achieved.
And one final word to the point that you were making just now. Could you elaborate what is the pressure, what is the kind of pressure that the Biden administration is facing, both domestically and from the international community? Because right now the impression seems to be that they're almost giving Israel a free pass.
President Biden is in an election year. He's going to have a tough fight on his hands. In fact, the poll numbers are against him in this coming election where President Trump is expected to be the Republican candidate. So President Biden needs every domestic vote that he can get. And there's a proportion of the electorate, young progressives, I believe is the term people use. But this is a significant enough element of Democratic voters who would vote for the Democratic Party, voters who would potentially vote for President Biden, who simply don't like the United States way that it's handling the situation in Gaza and is not putting more pressure on Israel. And for that reason, they may not come out and vote. So Biden needs those votes. So he's under that domestic pressure at home to toughen his stance with Israel. Internationally, there's a huge amount at stake. His regional partners, the United States regional partners, whether they're in the Gulf here or in Europe or in other parts of the world, are becoming more deeply estranged from the US position. And that's going to make diplomacy, it's going to make strengthening alliances around the world tougher. There is a large portion of the world that looks at what's happening in Gaza, isn't happy, looks to the United States to put more pressure on Israel, and that will be to the diplomatic detriment of the United States going forward. So I think those are the pressures at stake here.
All right, Nick Robertson, CNN Chief International Correspondent, live for us from Tel Aviv tonight. Thank you very much.